Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update here on social media. Thank you as always for joining us. You know, as I look at the news events of the week and of the past few weeks, I always have to figure out now, what does the media think that's important versus what actually is important? Or stories that the media are pushing, are they important in the way they think they are important, or is there another agenda at work that you should consider as you look at the news? And one of these stories is the issue of the President Trump's and the War Department's efforts to shut down the drug cartels using international waters in terroristic ways to undermine America and attack America through drug dealing and other misconduct. And they've been taking out the drug dealers using our military. And the Washington Post had a story that got a lot of attention here in Washington. This is kind of what I'm wondering. It's like, well, did you pay attention to it, dear listener or dear viewer? And I suspect you didn't pay nearly as much attention as the establishment here in Washington paid to it. And the Washington Post story generally was, oh, Hegseth told the military that they needed to kill everyone on board a particular vessel. And in following his orders, after the vessel was initially hit, there were two survivors just helplessly flailing in the water, and they hit him again. And that was murder and a war crime. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but that was the story. And all the experts pretended to know what had actually happened. And after the harumphing from Congress and the usual suspects in media, more information came out about what actually happened. And it turned out the Washington Post story is false in all material respects, in the sense that the initial hit did not accomplish the military goal of taking out the boat and the narco-terrorists associated with it, and they finished the job with a second hit. Nothing inappropriate about it. And it wasn't the liberal media that echoed the Washington Post. They actually said the Washington Post is wrong. So you had the New York Times, ABC News say the video shows something different, the evidence shows something different, and there is no there in terms of the fake allegation that a crime occurred. I mean, when you've got the Washington Post with the echo chamber here in Washington, D.C., essentially saying that war crimes occurred targeting Hegseth, Trump by imputation, and leadership in the military, and who knows who else in the military down the chain of command, that's a pretty serious issue. And it was all a scam. What was behind that scam? What's the basis of it? Well, I would take you back to the seditious efforts to target our military and suggest that the military, by members of Congress, ignore presidential orders. Sure enough, within a minute, the Washington Post has this, what I believe to be a fake news story, as I highlighted on the internet, false in all material respects. And what is the goal? The goal is to create dissent in our military. So it's all part of this seditious conspiracy. But when you start falsely accusing the president, not only in this circumstance, but generally, of engaging in, quote, human rights abuses, in, quote, war crimes, or targeting people like Pete Hegseth and other officials of the administration with these vague allegations of war crimes and violating the laws of war, etc. I suspect what the plan is, not to prosecute him here at home. I mean, they do want to impeach Trump. That goes without saying. They'll try to prosecute Trump for all sorts of other reasons, probably resurrect the fake lawfare allegations they used to try to rig the election last time. But I think their goal is to have them tried abroad before these International Criminal Court or some type of quasi-judicial, kangaroo court at the transnational level. And that's what I think is happening. They are worried that the president might have immunity or that people like Hegseth might get pardoned, and they won't be able to pursue them as they wish to here in the United States under our system. And the way to get around that is to do what the left likes to do, which is to create new systems to try their political opponents. The law doesn't matter. It's just creating a new system to get it done, however illicit or not serious. And then you get people like, for instance, Mandami. Am I pronouncing his name correctly? I think I am. The incoming communist terrorist supporting mayor of New York, who, for instance, talks about wanting to arrest Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, if he's here, so he gets tried for war crimes. Do you not think people like Mandami are going to be unwilling to arrest Trump or Hegseth in part of an effort to get them sent overseas before these kangaroo court international tribunals? You betcha. Do you think that a Democratic Party-controlled Justice Department run by a Democratic Party president won't allow that to take place? Of course they will. So I think this is a situation we have to be very much aware of as we evaluate these stories. A, the Washington Post story was fake, but remember, it's not just human rights abuses that they're alleging in taking out these narco-terrorists. They allege human rights abuses with removing illegal aliens from the United States. They allege human rights abuses with just deploying the National Guard to protect life, limb, and property. So they're creating categories of violations of alleged laws and principles that would justify some sort of international, left-wing controlled tribunal to try and jail President Trump and other individuals in the Trump administration. Now, does it mean that's the only goal they have? No, of course not. I mean, they'll probably try to do some similar activity here, with their regenerated lawfare if they come back into power, or even before they come back into power. We don't know that. So that's the way I would evaluate this whole issue with Venezuela or dealing with the narco-terrorists on the high seas like we used to deal with pirates, which is you take them out. They're trying to justify a war crimes tribunal overseas to jail our president, to jail people like Hegseth. And a pardon is going to protect them. That's the thinking. So admittedly, this is a bit of speculation. But like I said, I don't know how much anyone's following all this, because this is a lot of hyperventilating by the usual suspects who get outraged about everything Trump does. And they thought they had Hegseth with this fake allegation he was somehow involved in war crimes, and it turned out to be bunk. Now, even though it is bunk, they all think it's true, or they're going to pretend it's true. So that's the other danger here. Just because the story is false and there's no evidence behind it, it's not going to stop them. It didn't stop them with Trump, with the last go-arounds with Lawfare, which continue in large measure, by the way. And it's not going to stop them in the future. So that's the way to think about the controversy over the videos of the boat that our military took out full of drug traffickers. Or at least that's the way I think you should think about it. So, and you can be sure that we'll be investigating the underlying issue to try to get the full truth as appropriate under law, to highlight the falsity, or I think it's going to highlight the falsity if they give us the records, of what the left is alleging here. And quickly, the other big news story this week was the arrest of the alleged January 6th bomber, someone who allegedly placed bombs around on or about January 6th. And 5 years later, they finally figured out who the suspect is, and there's been an arrest. And supposedly it's because the leadership of the FBI supposedly, the break in the case came because the FBI brought in new sets of eyes, investigators, to look at evidence they've had for years. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound right to me. And I kind of tweeted out my analysis here. It's worth reflecting on because I don't think I'll improve upon it talking off the cuff here. Let me bring up the tweet so you can look at it. And I kind of summarize. A nice thing about tweets, it sometimes forces you to to make the point succinctly. And this is the point succinctly. The arrest of a January 6 pipe bomb subject nearly 5 years after his alleged crimes, based on evidence already long available to the government, is curious and disconcerting. Assuming this is the guy, one wonders how clues and evidence pointing to this suspect were supposedly missed by the FBI for years. So there are a few conclusions here that one might draw based on the late apprehension of this individual. And they have all this detail. You can look at the details and provide links to the information provided to the court justifying the arrest and how they have all these receipts and such showing his purchase of components that could be used to create such devices, how he was potentially in the area at the time, how he had maybe the same sneaker as the person in the video that has been put out there, all of which they've had. And so what conclusions can one draw that they had to have another set of eyes to take a look at this? That the most significant, most powerful law enforcement organization in the history of the world, the FBI, couldn't figure it out till just now. Well, one conclusion that some people are drawing, and I'm not in a position to shoot it down, but I'm raising it, nor I'm not necessarily endorsing it, but I'm raising it, is that they had the information, they knew who it likely was, but there was no interest in pursuing it because the person was seen to be a Democrat and might have been a leftist. And they didn't want to arrest him because it would have undermined the narrative that January 6th was all about destroying our democracy by Trump supporters. The other conclusion that I think is more likely is that the FBI is a disaster. That they can't, it's Keystone Cops at best. I don't think it was ignorance. I don't think it was willful ignorance. I think generally it's incompetence. That's always, the simplest explanation generally is the most likely one. And I think it's true in this case. And so rather than, I don't necessarily complain. I'm not necessarily complaining about celebrating that they caught the guy finally. But if I were the FBI director, if I were the Attorney General, if I were the President of the United States, I would see this as more evidence that the FBI needs to be shattered and scattered. They can't be trusted to investigate anything. They were able to obtain data in a way that was quite invasive. You know, they got a credit card data for purchases all over the area, nationally. Think of all the bank data they got related to January 6th that I thought was an outrageous fishing expedition, violating the privacy and civil liberties of countless Americans. And they couldn't find this guy? That's not acceptable. And an organization that fails repeatedly on issues like this, forget about the politicization. Forget about it being used like a political police against conservatives and Donald Trump. Forget about all that. They just don't do their job well. Now, are there individual agents who do their job well? I suppose so, but all that's irrelevant. Institutionally, the FBI is a failure. It's to a degree, it's still around. It's because of the inertia of the big state, of the deep state and big government. Is that agencies are just around forever. their efficacy, their success, whether they waste or abuse tax dollars, it's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant. So yes, if this is the guy, I'm glad they picked him up. I'm interested to know if the evidence is strong. Given the way the investigation progressed, I'm sure defense attorneys for this individual are going to be very aggressive in wondering why, if they had the evidence already, was he already a suspect? Why did they not arrest him earlier? You know, is the evidence any different? Or maybe they were just reading the evidence in a way that is inappropriate and presenting it in a way that's inappropriate in terms of justifying an arrest. I don't know. But assuming all that aside, this FBI is a disaster. And I've said it many times before, and it's worth repeating. I don't trust the FBI. And the fact that it took nearly 5 years to find this gentleman, even though they had allegedly, by their own admission, the evidence to do so beforehand, just is what an indictment of that agency. So you can be sure that Judicial Watch will be using FOIA to investigate this disaster of an investigation. It's no victory for the rule of law for an agency to be floundering for 5 years, unable to analyze the evidence they had until its time has passed so much that the final arrest is seen with suspicion by countless Americans. So that's my take on that. And quickly, in terms of, I shouldn't say quickly because I can't do anything quickly, it seems, in terms of analysis. There was a big victory for the rule of law at the Supreme Court level this week. What had been happening in Texas, you've been following, I'm sure, the leftist caterwauling over the Texas redistricting plan that would make it much more likely for Republicans to obtain 5 new congressional seats next year. And the left challenged that plan, Democrats, as being based on race, that they said that the Republicans had changed the districts using race in a way that was contrary to law. And the defense of the Republicans was, no, it's partisan. We were changing it to get a partisan advantage. That's perfectly legal. And the fact that minorities tend to support Democrats, that's the coincidence of it making it look like a racial gerrymander. Well, the lower court threw out the Texas districts, essentially buying the left-wing canard that it was race-based when it was partisan-based. And the Supreme Court said, no, 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 no. You're not going to do this. First of all, the election has already started, and you're not following the rules about how to analyze this. And I think it's important because you don't really get a feel for this from the liberal media because they pretend everything is racist that Republicans or conservatives do. And in this case, it was embraced by a court in a way that upended, I would argue, a democracy. And I explained it here in a lengthy post to X that I think is worth sharing because it kind of summarizes the issues I talked about in a good way and gives you a feel for what the issue is. So they stayed the ruling of the lower court. It was a panel, 2-1 decided against the Texas legislature, Texas. And so now the redistricting plan that the Texas put in place to benefit Republicans will continue and will likely be the basis for the 2026 election. So as I highlight online here, it's the Supreme Court decision in the Texas redistricting case is an important victory for constitutional federalism, the rule of law, and democracy. Yes, I know we're a constitutional republic, but our republic has democratic features, right? We vote and elect people, and we get to decide how a lot of our elections take place through votes, or in the case of redistricting, voting for state legislators who then exercise their discretion on behalf of voters to set up congressional districts which affect representation in Congress. And the Supreme Court just upheld, as I said, Texas's redistricting plan against, as I call it, activist judges. And this is the quote from the Supreme Court ruling. Activist judges who improperly inserted themselves into an active primary campaign, causing much confusion and upsetting the delicate federal-state balance in elections. And one core point, which kind of just blows out, you won't ever really get a full understanding from this from the media, and hopefully I'm able to explain it to you, is that the basic thing that needs to be done in these types of disputes was not done, and the court didn't give a rat's tail about it and punish Texas despite the rule not being followed. When you allege that a redistricting plan is based on race and not based on partisanship, if it's based on race, again, unlawful in theory. If it's based on partisanship, lawful. The defense against that is, look, there's no distinction between the two. It may look like race to you, but it's partisan. And the race is just a natural coincidence associated with minority support for Democrats. So it should be no surprise that it looks like it's a racial decision when in fact it's purely demographic and based on partisanship. It's not demographic at all, it's just partisan. And as I wrote, one key point is that the leftist Democratic Party challengers falsely asserted that Texas redrew maps based on race, which is unlawful, as I've noted, rather than partisan advantage, which is lawful. When making such an allegation, one is generally supposed to offer an alternative map drawn to achieve the same partisan advantage without racial considerations. So if you're alleging, oh, that's all about race, you could have gotten to the same result in terms of partisan advantage if you had used this map. You're supposed to present that alternative map. They didn't, which suggests they knew it was a lie, that it was a partisan map and race was not the motivator. The challengers did not bother to do that, make that map available, and the lower court couldn't be bothered to make them do it as the rules require. And as Justice Alito noted in a concurrence supporting the order, let's bring up that concurrence, I'll show it to you. So what happens here, this is kind of the court issued an order staying the decision lower and basically allowing the Texas case to go forward, the Texas maps to be reinstated. And sometimes orders are, one pages, we order this. Sometimes they explain why they've issued the order. In this case, you had some justices explain in a concurrence, as Alito filed, why they supported the outcome, and the dissent, 3 justices dissented, filed a lengthy dissent. This is how Justice Alito explains it. Maybe he explains it better than I did. You can understand it more clearly. Because of the correlation between race and partisan preference, as I noted, Democrats benefit from minority votes disproportionately. Litigants can easily use claims of racial gerrymandering for partisan ends. And he cites the case law. To prevent this, our precedents place the burden on the challengers to disentangle race and politics. Thus, when the asserted reason for a map is political, it is critical for challengers to produce an alternative map that serves the state's allegedly partisan aim just as well as the map the state adopted. So in essence, they're saying if you say, oh, they used race to get to their end result, you have to present a map that says they could have used partisanship to get to the same end result. And if they don't, you presume the state was honest in the saying that they were using it for, they were analyzing the redistricting based on partisan benefit. Although respondents' experts could have easily produced such a map, if that were possible, they did not, giving rise to a strong inference that the state's map was indeed based on partisanship, not race. Neither the duration of the district court's hearing, so the left was saying, oh, they had all sorts of evidence for months, nor the length of its majority opinion, and they wrote a long opinion justifying their activism, provides an excuse for failing to apply the correct legal standards as set out clearly in our case law. So between the majority decision or the majority opinion for the ruling and Alito's concurrence, they are saying the courts acted improperly below and politically below, didn't follow the rules, and improperly interfered with an election. So when it comes to election rigging or election interference, it's not just politicians playing games or parties trying to rig elections. Sometimes courts interfere in elections too. And here, the Supreme Court put an end to that, at least in Texas. So a significant victory for the rule of law, and highlighting how the courts can interfere in our elections just as dramatically as folks we more typically think of in terms of election rigging. So good news out of the Supreme Court. So last I checked, Judicial Watch filed well over 1,000 FOIA lawsuits since we've started operations. 1,000 FOIA lawsuits. It's probably closer to 1,500 now. And we just don't stop. And I don't care if politicians of either party want to move beyond an issue. If we've got questions about something and we have a right to the records and people are concerned about the issue and the issue is an important one for America to figure out the details of, we just keep on keeping on. And we already have, for instance, a lawsuit for the Epstein records that were supposed to be released or promised to be released that have yet to be released by the Trump administration. Even though Congress has passed a law signed by President Trump requiring that the records be released as soon as, I think, 2 weeks from now, there's still many other records that Americans haven't seen and still won't see even under this transparency law related to Epstein records. And the administration has rightly taken credit for records they have turned over to the Congress, thousands of pages of records related to the Epstein scandal. The challenge is we haven't seen all the records, and we're not guaranteed to see all the records because we don't necessarily have a right to congressional records. Did you know that? Congress can get records. They don't have to release them. There's no way to guarantee they release all the records they get. So we know that's the way things work. And of course, the records were turned over pursuant to a subpoena. So what Judicial Watch did was we filed a FOIA request for the records the Justice Department turned over to Congress about Epstein. We know what to do, right? We know the tricks to avoid disclosure, and one way is to turn it over to Congress and hopefully keep your fingers crossed that Congress doesn't make all the records public. We sued for all records provided to the House Oversight Committee, or the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, in response to a subpoena transmitted to Attorney General Bondi in August. All records relied upon during the preparation of any response to the House Committee on Government Reform transmitted to Attorney General Bondi. So we want to know, what records did you rely on when you were working on it? Was there material that was withheld? We want the details. And internal communications or external communications, depending, but we wanted records of communications between the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, and any other individual or entity regarding the department's response to that big subpoena. So show us the records. That's what we want on Epstein. And I largely agree with the analysis by President Trump that the goal of the left in this case is to pretend that Trump had something nefarious to do with Epstein, even though everyone knows there's really no evidence of that. The evidence is that the left, Epstein was essentially a buddy of powerful Democrats up until the end. That's what the records that have been released thus far document. But the American people want access to this information, and we're just going to keep on pushing for it. And we don't think the law passed by Congress is sufficient. And that's why we have this new lawsuit to try to get the Epstein records. I mean, it's the third one. I think there's at least two others, probably more. Let me see here. Yes, we sued the CIA in October. I forgot about that. The law doesn't cover CIA records on Epstein. We also sued for the leaks of Epstein-related material to the liberal media. I mean, we have FOIAs and lawsuits for Epstein records, and the Justice Department leaks it to left-wing media outlets rather than complying with the law and turning the records over as they're supposed to Judicial Watch and others. So we want to know what's going on there. And then, of course, we have a general lawsuit for the, quote, Epstein records generally that Attorney General Bondi said she, quote, had on her desk. She said, I think she meant it metaphorically. But it's strange because in that lawsuit, they told us they had no records about Epstein from Attorney General Bondi's office, which makes zero sense. And there's a fourth lawsuit as well about one of Epstein's victims, Virginia Giuffre. We want records from the agencies about them, about her. So one way to get Judicial Watch to ask questions is to play games on records. And whether you're Republican or Democrat, if you play games on records, and the Justice Department, I think by their own admission, would probably agree, yeah, Tom, we didn't handle those records all that well when we started releasing them and telling the public about what we were and weren't going to release, and we wish we had done better. Well, one way to do better is by complying with FOIA and releasing the records pursuant to FOIA. And stop playing games by modified limited hangouts of records with friendly reporters, or burying them in Congress by pretending your duty of disclosure ends after you respond to a subpoena to Congress. Now, that should just be the beginning. So I'll let you know how this proceeds, but we're not stopping on these Epstein files. And of course, Epstein is just one issue out there, and we recognize with respect to government corruption, it's something the public is interested in. But the public also wants accountability for, and I think this is the reason President Trump was elected in large measure, because they want accountability for the lawfare against President Trump and countless other Trump supporters and conservatives and Republican Party officials who were targeted by the deep state, by the left, by the Biden gang, etc., in retaliation for disputing the 2020 election, exercising their First Amendment rights, and as part of a program to ensure Trump was not going to be reelected in 2024. Election interference 101. And we've been second to none in demanding accountability for it. We've complained about the abuses of Biden, and in retaliation, we were targeted. They sent the FBI to my house to serve a subpoena on me. They gave a subpoena to Judicial Watch as well for pure harassment. Pure harassment, to haul me before a grand jury for hours asking me about my tweets. Pure harassment. So forgive me for still being a little upset about it. I'm wondering why no one has been prosecuted or arrested for those abuses. And of course, I was just a witness. Judicial Watch didn't have anything to do with any unlawful activity. Not that there was any unlawful activity. Trump didn't do anything unlawful either. But they wanted to put him in jail for life. And nothing's been done about it yet. Yeah, I know we're told things are going on behind the scenes. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And even if they are, we want to do our own investigation because we don't trust the FBI or Justice Department. We don't trust them. Institutionally, they're incapable of investigating themselves. So we filed yet another lawsuit for records about Jack Smith's lawfare on Trump. All communications we asked for back in November of last year. For records with the communications with the New York left-wing operations targeting Trump, Fani Willis in Fulton County, the Biden gang, the Biden White House, and any other federal law enforcement or government office. And, you know, like people like Alvin Bragg, you know, who was targeting Trump, Letitia James, etc. And incredibly, we haven't gotten any records from the Trump Justice Department. Pam Bondi, call your office. Get these records out to Judicial Watch. Why are we having to file federal FOIA lawsuits to get your agency to comply with a lawful request, as federal law requires, about abuse of President Trump by the Biden gang, by Jack Smith? Why are you hiding Jack Smith records? The American people deserve transparency about the lawfare committed by Smith, Biden, etc. I mean, we sued Fani Willis for communications with the Justice Department. We sued Arizona's Attorney General, the Democrat out there, who's engaged in lawfare for her communications, part of the conspiracy. We're trying to figure out the conspiracy. We kind of know what the outlines are, but we want the details pursuant to transparency law. And it's one thing for the Democrat Attorney General of Arizona to play games. It's one thing for Fani Willis to lie to us about documents. Remember, in our case of Fani Willis, she said she had no documents. That was a lie. They hadn't even looked for the documents. She had to pay us money as a result of those lies. The case was shut down as a result of those lies, in part, I think. But we can't get this Justice Department to give us the documents? Unacceptable. Unacceptable. So hopefully Pam Bondi is watching this. Madam Attorney General, give us the records. Give us the records about Jack Smith's abuse of Trump. We had to sue. We're in court now. So you've got a legal reason to give us the records. It would have been nice if we had gotten the records without having to sue and you just followed the plain law, or your people did. So this is life at Judicial Watch. You know, we end up having to sue, you know, agencies run by people who really ought to be transparent and know the power of transparency. I mean, the Justice Department has been transparent on a few, or you know, one or two issues with respect to Judicial Watch, but it's been exceedingly painful. And more or less, they really haven't changed their approach to transparency. It's no different than the Biden administration or the Obama administration. You've got to have the commitment at the top to getting this transparency followed, especially on issues that relate to whether our republic survives or fails, which I think that lawfare is one of those issues. So there's a lot going on here at Judicial Watch, and you can see why our work is so important, because we're doing a lot of the work that Congress isn't doing, and the Justice Department isn't doing, and the FBI isn't doing, or even if they are, they're doing it in an untrustworthy manner. So if you don't trust the government and want a watchdog watching the watchers, then you're going to love Judicial Watch. And I encourage you, if you're not already, to support our work by going to judicialwatch.org and making your most generous contribution now. But even if you don't decide to do that, go to our website, share the wealth, follow us on social media, and get the word out, because that's as powerful a tool to achieve our ends for our Constitution and our Republic as your personal support as well. So thank you, and I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.